Shikoku Island, Japan, the 8th century AD. A young monk named Saiki Mao was deep in the mountains doing his spiritual training when he decided to enter a small cave called Makurudo and meditate. While inside, he had an encounter that he would later credit with bringing him enlightenment. And he emerged from the cave as Kukai, a high priest who would become one of Japan's most important historical figures.
Many Buddhists have reported enlightening experiences in caves, and one of the most famous stories involves the monk Kukai. He's the individual who brought esoteric Buddhism, Shingon Buddhism, to Japan from China. And according to his autobiography, he was meditating in a cave at Cape Maruto, and he had fixed his eyes on the morning star. The morning star flew towards him, entered his mouth, and in front of him he saw an image of the Bodhisattva Akasagarbha. And Akasagarbha in Japanese is known as Kokuzo Bosatsu. So we have this spiritual being surrounded by light. Perhaps he even used the light to travel there.
After this encounter, Kukai suddenly had great wisdom, including the ability to comprehend 85,000 Buddhist texts. But what happened inside Makurudo Cave that allowed Kukai to enter this enlightened state?
Kokuzo appeared to Kukai in the cave when he was in his trance and basically informed him that he was a conduit to the universe. And it channeled through his body, and he could tell you anything about the stars, the planet. It was almost as if he were tapped into a database.
Some even perceive that the cave is similar to a womb. So a human being enters as a normal mortal. They engage in ascetic or meditative discipline within the cave. And when they exit the cave, they're no longer a typical mortal, but they're more akin to a saint or even a Buddha.
But could the enlightenment found inside caves be coming from an extraterrestrial source inside the Earth? Some ancient astronaut theorists say yes, and suggest evidence of this might be found in the fabled nirvana known as Shambhala and the sky caves of Mustang in Nepal.
Some say Shambhala is a mythical city that's located somewhere in the mountains in the Himalayas. Its inhabitants are supposed to be fully enlightened beings who have access to a great amount of technology, which comes from the Enlightenment itself.
Buddhism has always seen caves as more or less a conduit to altered states of consciousness, to other civilizations that may exist inside the Earth.
The sky caves in Mustang are interesting because there are 100 or so man-made caves carved into the faces of cliffs, and are only accessible by these huge vertical shafts. And inside these caves, we have huge statues of Buddhas, Bodhisattvas.
And Buddhists are not alone in this belief. Hindus also revere caves as places where monks can go to find wisdom.
The sadhu are Indian holy men who basically leave a life of deprivation, self-imposed exile in caves, so that they can enter these altered states of consciousness. They definitely believe that caves are a conduit to communicating with non-human entities.
It's almost as though they're opening a doorway into a spiritual consciousness in which they're able to communicate with these divine beings and hopefully become divine themselves.
Other important figures throughout history also attribute their life-altering epiphanies to mysterious encounters that happened in caves.
In the life of the great artist and inventor Leonardo da Vinci, he had some unusual but important experience at the mouth of a cave. Right after that, he disappeared for 2 years. And right after that, he began this spurt of creativity that was awesome. In art and in science, he invented the first self-propelled vehicle and imagined flying machines.
Joseph Smith wrote that an angel appeared to him at the name of Moroni in the year 1827. Told to Joseph Smith he should go to a certain little hill, he should put a stone plate away, and inside he would find a cave, and in the cave he would find unknown writings.
As all good Mormons know, he found them golden tablets which contained a vast amount of data.
South America. The Andes mountain range in Ecuador. For thousands of years, this rainforest, high on the eastern slopes, has been the land of the Shuar. Headhunters who are fiercely protective of their homeland and its secrets. And of all the Shuar's secrets, perhaps none has been so carefully guarded as the location and entrance of the Cave of Taos. But why? Perhaps the answer can be found in the story of an Italian Catholic missionary named Father Crespi, who lived in the region in the middle of the last century.
Father Carlo Crespi, he was loved by the Indians. He helped them without asking for money, and the Indians made them some presents.
But what was unique about the presents or gifts given to Father Crespi was that they often took the form of elaborately carved artifacts, some made of gold or other precious metals. Often these objects featured elaborate carvings and symbols, not known to be associated with the Shuar culture. In his 1973 book, Gold of the Gods, ancient astronaut theorist Erich von Däniken wrote of Father Crespi's incredible collection, which he believed to come from the Cave of Taos, and which were, in his opinion, treasures from an unknown and highly advanced culture. The startling questions posed in von Däniken's book soon inspired Scottish explorer Stanley Hall to try and solve the mystery himself. In 1975, Hall traveled to Cuenca to see Father Crespi's collection with his own eyes.
I have for years been researching South America as the missing page of prehistory. I first heard of the Taos Caves was in Erich von Däniken's book and followed it through from there.
And one of the presents which the old priest received is a tablet with 36 writings. It's a metallic tablet. No one until today was able to translate these writings.
In 1976, Stanley Hall mounted an expedition of more than 100 people to explore Taos. Among them was American astronaut Neil Armstrong, the first man to walk on the moon. Entering the cave through a jungle entrance known to the Ecuadorian army, the explorers were fascinated by what they encountered, especially large areas that appeared to have been excavated by someone or something.
The head of the British Geological Group, Dr. Brian Kelly, in 1976, he admitted that it was difficult for him to explain the actual large doorways that you see in these caves.
Although Stan Hall's expedition did find a tomb chamber with items dating to 1500 BC.
A ring! A stone ring!
The expedition found no treasure and no trace of anything that looked like the artifacts in Father Crespi's collection. But if Taos was not the secret origin of Father Crespi's amazing collection, where did it come from? Undaunted, Hall didn't give up his search. 15 years later, in 1991, the explorer tracked down an Ecuadorian named Petronio Jaramillo, who claimed to have entered the cave of Tayos through a secret entrance back in 1946.
And apparently, Petronio had visited this cave for the very first time when he was very young, when he was in his teens. He said that he had to dive underwater, go in this underwater tunnel, and then come up.
Jaramillo told Hall he wandered through chamber after chamber of ancient relics, including a vast room of books made from gold and other metals, books with unrecognizable writing, possibly like that on one of the metal tablets in Father Crespi's collection.
So other things looked like formulas, and so on and so on. So it was one spectacular statement after another.
Some argue whether or not an ancient civilization had come down to Earth and had used this cave system to leave certain artifacts of their civilization behind for us to recover.
Unfortunately, before he could guide Stanley Hall to the underwater cave entrance, Petronio Jaramillo died, taking the secret to his grave. Stanley Hall himself died in 2008, before he was able to renew his search for the so-called Metal Library. Fortunately, Stanley Hall's daughter, Eileen, has decided to continue her father's work.
Unless we find this treasure, unless we can see, translate the writing, it's still a big question mark over who wrote it, why they put it there, and who put it there.
The Himalayas, northern India. Every summer, hundreds of thousands of Hindu pilgrims brave an arduous journey. They cross many miles of deadly terrain to reach the Amarnath cave, a place of worship for thousands of years.
12,756 feet above sea level in the Himalayas is the most revered holy pilgrimage site for all of the people who follow the Hindu faith.
People die because of high altitude sickness. There's a simply fall off the cliff. And still people go there because it is considered to be the most holiest shrine.
According to local lore, this massive cave is where the god Shiva revealed the secrets of immortality and the creation of the universe to his wife Parvati. To honor Shiva, worshippers pay their respects to a sacred relic inside, an ice lingam, which they believe is a physical manifestation of his generative power.
To reveal the secret to transcending the flesh, the secret to true immortality, makes that site of extreme importance to the people in the Hindu faith.
To the Hindu faithful who risk life and limb to reach the Amarnath cave, this story is a real account of an otherworldly being who is at this exact location here on Earth. But why would Lord Shiva choose to divulge his divine secrets in a cave? Could caves really hold special properties that have made them places of worship throughout history? Interestingly, the Amarnath cave is only one of hundreds of caves around the world that have been at one time considered sacred. Archaeologists believe a 20-foot-long serpentine rock carving in Botswana's Rhino Cave was the focus of religious ritual as far back as 70,000 years ago. And cave monasteries can be found in France, Russia, Thailand, Ethiopia, and Hungary, just to name a few.
I don't think that this is a coincidence that places of refuge, spiritual refuge, are inside caves. This is where one can contemplate, one can hear one's inner voice without the distractions of the day.
One thing about caves is they're underground, they're unseen. Well, religion is about unseen things. Going into a cave is going into holy ground.
Is the mysterious nature of caves enough to explain why they have been revered as sacred places by different cultures and religions all over the world? Ancient astronaut theorists suggest there may be a more profound reason, which can be found by examining the stories behind our ancestors' rituals. Yucatan, Mexico, 2008. Mexican archaeologists exploring just outside the capital of Mérida make an historic discovery: an aquatic underworld full of mysterious offerings to the Mayan gods, including human sacrifices.
What they found was a system of 14 caves, and in them were stone temples, and they were all linked together. And it was thought that what they had discovered was the Mayan underworld known as Xibalba.
Some of this work is underwater. Divers would have had to hold their breath and go down and do carving underwater to make this possible. They were very devout, to be sure.
Central to the heavily Mayan ritualistic society was the belief that in order for them to rejoin the gods in the next life, the dead must make their way through a dark and perilous journey.
In the mythology of the Maya, we have these incredible references to Xibalba, which means the underworld. And we can read about it in the Popol Vuh, which is the book of the jaguar priests.
Some historians believe that the caves discovered in 2008 are indeed those caves that represented for the Maya the passageway to Xibalba, the underworld. But ancient astronaut theorists propose Xibalba has a more cosmic connection.
One of the most famous code breakers, her name was Dr. Linda Sheely. She dealt with the Maya language all her life. She is actually one of the people who have suggested that there is another meaning for Xibalba, and that's the Milky Way.
To the Mayans, who were very good astronomers, this represented the passageway to another world, Xibalba, the middle of the Milky Way. So when they refer to the underworld, they're actually referring to the sky above.
This suggests that the cave could be a portal in which extraterrestrials are actually able to come and go freely from their plane of existence to our own.
Bordered on the north by the Black Sea and by the Taurus Mountains to the south, lies Cappadocia in central Turkey. Here, wind and water have sculpted strange shapes out of the soft volcanic rock. Rock which ancient peoples once turned into small primitive dwellings. In more recent years, the site has seen the construction of more modern structures. But in 1963, a simple home renovation in the town of Derinkuyu led to an extraordinary discovery when a cave wall was opened, revealing a passageway to an underground city thousands of years old and more than 280 feet deep.
I've been there on multiple occasions, and incredible because there's 13 stories that go deep into the ground with ventilation shafts and 15,000 little shafts that bring air to even the deepest of levels.
Incredibly, the number of rock rooms that were found could hold over 20,000 men, women, and children. There was even evidence of religious centers, storerooms, wine presses, and stables for livestock.
Oh, Derinkuyu would have been a massive undertaking for anyone, even in modern times, with modern equipment. But in those days, it would have been stupendous, equal to the pyramids. At Derinkuyu, because of the softness of the stone, you had to be very careful that you provided enough pillar strength to support the floors above, otherwise you'd have catastrophic cave-ins. Surprisingly, there's no evidence of any catastrophic cave-ins, so they were apparently extremely clever and knew their material. We're talking deep antiquity. It is mind-boggling to understand how they could have done this. Perhaps they had help from some other civilization.
But just who built this massive underground city? And what mysterious force drove them to live underground?
Why would people want to live deep underground in these weird caverns like that? It seems kind of scary, really.
According to many archaeologists and scholars, Derinkuyu was most likely intended to serve as a temporary shelter from invasion. Built around 800 BC by the Phrygians, a Bronze Age people related to the Trojans. Others believe it was built by the Hittites, a warrior people mentioned in the Bible who flourished hundreds of years earlier. But could the underground city be even older? According to ancient astronaut theorists, it is. Perhaps by many thousands of years.
The Cappadocia region of Turkey was part of the Zoroastrian Empire, which was Persian in nature. And it's one of the oldest religious traditions on the face of the earth.
The Zoroastrian religion, an ancient faith based on opposing forces of good and evil, is widely believed to have influenced both Hinduism and Judeo-Christianity. Founded sometime before the 6th century BC, its chief god is the creator, Ahura Mazda. And in the second chapter of the Zoroastrian sacred text, the Vendidad, Ahura Mazda saves mankind from a worldwide environmental disaster, much like the story of Noah in the Hebrew Testament.
The great prophet Yima, he was instructed to build a kind of underground refuge similar to Derinkuyu by the sky god Ahura Mazda.
According to the sacred texts, Yima built a multi-level underground city to protect a select group of people and animals, not from a flood, but from a global ice age. The Vendidad calls this the evil winters. According to many mainstream climatologists, the last ice age peaked around 18,000 years ago and ended around 10,000 BC. Is it possible that Derinkuyu was built as a refuge from a devastating global winter?
Since you cannot carbon date stone, it's anybody's guess how old Derinkuyu really is. And my question is, if we have a Zoroastrian story that's very similar, could it be that both that place and Derinkuyu are much, much older than what we've believed so far?